Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Live at 5. I am your host and curator, Kevin Adkisson, coming to you from Cranbrook House. And on today's Live at 5 tour, brought to you by the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. I wasn't expecting it to be such a beautiful day that it turned out to be, and I foolishly chose an indoor location. And we are going to talk about some of guests' favorite things here at Cranbrook House, something that a lot of guests asked questions about, and especially when we have lunches or special events here in the house, everyone is always wondering what's up there close to the ceiling. And I know that my friends at the Cranbrook House and Gardens Auxiliary, on their tours, they talk about some of these little paintings, these cartouches. But I thought today, in the spirit of Live at 5, I would attempt to go through all of them. So if you are new to Live at 5, or if you are new to Cranbrook, you may not know where exactly I am. So I am in Cranbrook House, and this window is locked. This one is not. We are in the Oak Room, and the Oak Room is right off of the front door. And the internet does not go through the window, apparently. The car turn around. And this room, the Oak Room, was added on to the house a year after the library was. And so it added a couple of rooms upstairs, including a major bedroom with a beautiful Pewabic fireplace that's directly above us. And then it also added this large room. Now, the architect was Albert Kahn, the great Detroit industrial architect, who built the original house in 1908. He came back in 1918 to design the library wing, and then he came back just a year later to design what on the floor plan was called the music room. And it's had a number of different names over the years, but we call it today the Oak Room, and it is sort of the main conference room for Cranbrook leadership. So Cranbrook Educational Community, the staff of the central office, are here on the second and third floor of Cranbrook House, as well as development and accounting and HR, and even me, the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. My boss, the director, Greg Whitkop, and my own office are upstairs. And so most of the time I'm in the Oak Room. I'm here for a meeting, but we also do, of course, the tours through the House and Gardens Auxiliary, and then you may have come on any type of event or special occasion in which you sat in the room and wondered what was up above you. Now, the Oak Room name comes from the beautiful oak paneling that was carved by the studio of Johannes Kirschmeier, or John Kirschmeier, who was a Bavarian German-born woodcarver practicing at in Boston and associated with the Boston Society of Arts and Crafts. And the linen fold oak paneling is all quarter sawn oak, so you're seeing the ray fleck of the quarter sawn, which is the sort of intersection of different grains. And then it's really deeply cut because George Booth was very upset at the quality of carving from the Kirschmeier studio in the library. And he said, if I can't tell it's hand carved, I will not be commissioning you to design anymore. Of course, it is deeply gouged. And as part of this design, this sort of Tudor-Beathan revival style in the room, there are decorative carvings. And so we'll start here looking at the beautiful door that led to George Booth's little barber's office. It was also a flower cutting room and also just a storage closet, but it is where Booth got his hair cut. And up above this room, it has a G, and then following this lovely sort of English-style scroll work, we see a B. And this combination of sort of cornucopias ready for Thanksgiving here, strap work, and then botanic forms. It's all very typical of what you see in design sources and pattern books of the sort of Elizabethan era, and would have been very popular here in 1919. But the today's tour is mostly going to be focused on these cartouches, and I thought we would just go one by one. So if you don't love Cranbrook, don't love me and Live at 5, this might be a little bit dull for you, but stick with me because I think you're going to find it is very interesting, all of the significant events that are commemorated here on the walls. And first, a note about why these are here. Well, it all started, as so many good ceremonial Cranbrook traditions did, with Henry Scripps Booth and his sister Florence. They were the youngest siblings of 5, and Henry, throughout his life and throughout his long 90-plus year dedication to his parents' institutions, he was always interested in ceremony and commemoration. And so he loved adding flags to a ceremony. If you could have trumpeters or a costume party, if you could have a ceremonial play or poem recited, if you could write lyrics to a new hymn, all of those were great ways to mark occasions. And I kind of wholeheartedly agree with him that part of what makes things so memorable, thinking back to my own years growing up or at Yale and some of the traditions, that what you remember is sort of, the dining hall coming out with a full hog roasted on a spit being carried by 4 people with gingerbread houses on their head. And so Henry Booth attempted to create some of these own traditions here at Cranbrook. And the traditions included painting these little cartouches. And then the cartouches are documenting the traditions. So it's a great feedback loop. And most of the paintings seem to come from Henry Booth. Now, in preparing today's Live at 5, I thought surely someone has written a history, and there is a handy list of what they are. But Laura McNewman, the associate archivist, was really helping me do more research, and I think the next time we have a fellow or an intern, this would be a great project to actually really get in depth about the exact time these were added and what exactly they commemorate. So the first one that we'll start with in the corner here is on this narrow little cartouche, and we see that there are 7 cranes representing the 6 Cranbrook institutions and the Cranbrook Foundation. And so the 6 institutions are Brookside School, Cranbrook School for Boys, Kingswood School for Girls, Cranbrook Institute of Science, Cranbrook Academy of Art and Museum, and Christchurch Cranbrook. Or the 7th crane is for the foundation that sees it all. Down below, we have the Booth family crest, which was sort of invented by George, and it has 3 Bs for the 3 generations of Booths are Bs in North America with the gold chevron. And then the red stripe likely represents Cranbrook's location on the Rouge River, so the Red River. Next, we have one of my favorites, very sweet little depiction of a rocking horse. And this represents the time. You see at the top, a cartouche on a cartouche is the sort of cipher, the logo, the shield of Christchurch Cranbrook. And Christchurch Cranbrook, of course, was part of the community until 1973 when it became its own institution. But this represents not the church, but from when the Oak Room was used as a pre-3 nursery during church hours. And so this is representing the times that Cranbrook House Oak Room was the nursery for Christchurch Cranbrook. Next, from 1967, we have the Writers Guild. And I'm a little bit perplexed as to what the 1967 date is, because the Writers Guild, based on their records at Cranbrook Archives, was formed in 1970, but one of these is correct. And so you have the giant C and then WG for Cranbrook Writers Guild. And the Writers Guild was in operation here until the Great Recession, and it closed in 2008. And I love the hand with the quill with the great feathery plume, and then the sort of wonderfully sort of Shakespearean sleeve on the writer's hand. Very much the sort of 60s baronial look. Now, the next set is George Booth's 100th birthday. So 1864 is the year that Cranbrook's founder, George Booth, was born. 1964 is when Cranbrook celebrated the centennial salute to George Booth. And it was held on his birthday, September 24th, in 1964. And each of the institutions came to Cranbrook House, and off the North Terrace, they shot a series of fireworks. And so each institution launched 3 fireworks, bringing us 6 institutions times 3, 18. And then the Cranbrook Foundation set off a set of fireworks, and that got us to 21. And so it became a 21 fireworks salute to dear old George. Next, we get to the original cartouches. So those, I believe, were all painted in the 1970s, quite possibly by Joseph Ford, who was an Academy of Art painting student, who Henry says painted 4 of these. Now, the next 6 or so were painted, these are the original ones, and so these go all the way back to the first years of the Okru, and Henry Booth himself painted these around 1921. And so we're now at the middle of the far wall, and we have a beautiful Moravian tile fireplace, which was made by the German immigrants in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in eastern Pennsylvania. And it depicts different Old Testament scenes. And then above that, from Bartholomeus de Bruyn, the elder, the Cologne German-based painter, we have this lovely a piece of ecclesiastical art that was, it's a oil on board painting that has been cut and then framed in a Gothic frame. And then above that, we have more cartouches. So starting here on the top left-hand corner, I should have saved this tour for December, both because it would have been colder, and here's a Christmas tree. And the family Christmas tree was actually only in this room 1 year, the year that the room was finished, 1920. Before that, the Christmas tree had been in the living room or the sunset porch. And after 1920, the Christmas tree was always set up in the library. But Henry painted this here to commemorate the annual family Christmases, when they would have the close family for a formal sit-down lunch, and then the neighbors and larger family for a buffet dinner. Next, we see Henry's painting of Sigma Gamma, which represents an outing for crippled children given by Florence Booth in 1922 for the Sigma Gamma organization here at Cranbrook. Next, this one is a little bit hard to see. It's easier to see on the phone than it is in person. This represents the ups and downs of married life, which was a theme of a dinner given before Warren Booth's wedding in 1922. It's a little bit hard to see exactly what it is, but there's a bell, and then up at the top there's a sort of 2 candlesticks and a flower arrangement. And again, these are all painted by Henry Scripps Booth in the 1920s. Let me move my stool. We get to one that was painted in the 1930s, as I correct myself. This one commemorates the 50th anniversary of George and Ellen Booth's wedding in 1937. And so you have the doves and then the golden initials and the Scripps family crest on the right behind E for Ellen, and the Booth family crest on the left behind G for George. Next, we come to this happy little Victorian scene. And these costumed figures represent a surprise birthday party for Ellen Booth. The surprise party was on July 10th, 1921. And it was going quite well. There were some 30-odd people invited to the surprise party. Ellen didn't know all about it at all. The kids and grandkids were busy planning. And then Ellen got hungry, and she needed a snack. And so she came downstairs to the kitchen behind, and what was happening in the kitchen but the preparations for her elaborate surprise birthday luncheon. And so the whole surprise was ruined about an hour before it was to take place. except that she did not know what was going to happen for her surprise birthday. And so all of the guests had gathered at Tower Cottage, which is the sort of garage of Cranbrook House. And that's where they had been asked to come in costume. And if you showed up without a costume, Henry Booth made you a costume. And so everyone marched to Cranbrook House to celebrate this surprise birthday for their mother, Ellen. And one of the guests, no one quite knew who he was, Mr. A.C. Nordquist, I think, and there was just this sort of regal, large, second cousin, elegant lady, and it turned out that it was actually the husband who was cross-dressing for the party. So I'm not quite sure if that is who Henry Booth has chosen to depict here, but considering that was the sort of hit of the party, and this is a sort of large lady with an elaborate costume, I think that this may be Cranbrook's oldest depiction of a drag queen here on the wall. Now, from this costume party, they had an elaborate dinner, and then they had an elaborate play in which they were attempting to do accents, and all the accents were sort of more horrible than next, and everyone was laughing at each other in their terrible accents. Next up, we have these two hearts, which represent a dinner honoring some friends of the family, the engaged couples of Margaret Booth, who was a second cousin to J. Fraser Whitehead, and then Ruth Raymond to Norton Ives. And this was in September of 1921. And on this occasion, Henry Booth and his sister Florence decided that they would make an elaborate salad for the lunch. And it took them 3 hours to make it, but they didn't really have a recipe or an end goal. And in the end, everyone thought that they had made a porcupine. That was not the intention, but the salad looked like a porcupine. And so then they said, yes, your engagement dinner reception salad is a porcupine salad, and then went with, sort of just committed to that story. If you're just joining me, we're in the Cranbrook House Oak Room going through the ceremonial cartouches that document important elements in Cranbrook history. Now here's one that was painted in the 1980s, honoring Henry Scripps Booth's 90th birthday. And he went by the nickname Thistle because when he was sick in the 19-teens, he was unable to shave, and his sister Florence said he looked like a thistle. And so that was his nickname throughout his life. And this was painted by the House and Gardens Auxiliary in honor of their founder and the great savior of Cranbrook House, Henry Booth. Next, we have a couple doing the Charleston, and these represent the October 13th, 1922 debutante ball of Florence Booth. And they invited over 700 guests here to Cranbrook House. About 400 showed up, which Henry said was just right to make the house feel full. I have been to parties here at Cranbrook House with 250 people. I cannot imagine if all 700 showed up. It was a fall day, and so the whole house was decorated for the debutante ball with golden leaves, fall-colored leaves, and then dahlias and grapes from the gardens. Turning the corner, our next cartouche is from the Church Society for College Work, which was headquartered here at Cranbrook House in the West Wing from 1943 to 1946. So during the war years, Cranbrook was not, or large houses like Cranbrook House were not allowed to be lived in. There were square footage limits, and so all large homes across the country shut down the majority of the house. So George and Ellen Booth, who at that time were quite elderly, lived just here in the Oak Room as their living room. They took their meals in the old butler's pantry when it became the tapestry room, and they moved their bedrooms to the room directly upstairs. And then the Church Society for College Work moved in to make useful this shut down side of their personal residence. And so that is its crest there. Moving along past a, I believe, Swiss piece of stained glass, we see 4 more cartouches here above the reproduction portrait of James Edmund Scripps, Ellen's father, one of the co-founders, are founding donors and supporters of the Detroit Institute of Art, which is where the original portrait is. Here we have the Greek letters symbolizing the American Federation of Arts. And if you don't know the AFA, the American Federation, not Greek letters, it's just an AFA. If you don't know the AFA, George Booth was the president of it in 1920, but it was an organization started by Teddy Roosevelt and Secretary of State Elihu Root. And they established it with people like Andrew Mellon and J. Pierpont Morgan as a way to bring art to the inland of America. And so they realized that most American museums were on the coast. And so they organized traveling exhibits to go all around the country. The AFA is still in business. It's America's oldest museum association and the oldest traveling art association. They publish Who's Who in American Art in the Magazine of Art, the Index to American Museums. So I have certainly used a lot of AFA associated organizations and publications. I did not know that George Booth was president of the organization in 1920, which is the year that the AFA began pushing for a national museum, which would of course become Andrew Mellon's great gift to the country, the National Gallery of Art in 1941. So I just learned that today in reading about the Cartouches, that George Booth was president of the AFA the year that it began pushing for the National Gallery of Art to be formed. It will take further research to know what George Booth's leadership in that push was, because he clearly was not living in Washington, which is where the AFA was headquartered. Next, we get a Kingswood ceremonial cartouche, which symbolizes the Christmas holiday breakfast that the Booths would throw each year for the Kingswood boarding girls here at Cranbrook House. So they would be invited to Cranbrook House on Christmas morning. Next is my favorite, the one that I point out in every tour, which is commemorating the 1925 marriage of Florence Booth to James Beresford. And so you have a colorful tent and flag with the Booth family crest up above, representing Florence Booth, who went by Smike. And then she is marrying Mr. James Beresford, and so you see the bear fording the river, and it's of course a red river representing Detroit's River Rouge, or Rouge River, which the headwaters of are the sort of Cranbrook streams. So we're part of the River Rouge system. I just love that little one, though I forget exactly why Smike is represented by a circus tent. I've heard the reason one time, but I could not find it in my quick research today. Next, we have the Harp and Lyre, which represents the Cranbrook Music Guild, which Henry Booth established in 1952. And the Music Guild is still around, though I'm not sure exactly what their mission has evolved into today. Moving around, we're halfway there. Now I think the pace will quicken as we get to ones that are more modern. So this one, 1837 to 1917, represents Henry Wood Booth's 80th birthday. So this is George's father, and this was, I assume, painted, I'm not sure when, did he die in his 80th year? Because the room wasn't here in 1917, so the cartouche was not painted in 1917. But if you notice, we've seen the Booth family crest a few times, and it has 3 Bs with the gold chevron, and here it only has 2 Bs. That's because Henry Wood Booth was the 2nd generation of Booths in North America. And so the Booths continue to add Bs. So if you're the 6th generation, you can have 6 Bs, 7 Bs. And so that is the Henry Wood Booth iteration of the family crest. And if I turn the camera around, we can see him in my favorite portrait at Cranbrook, painted by the Czech immigrant painter Osip Perelma in 1919 or 1917. So he would have been alive. So this is painted on the grounds in plein air here at Cranbrook. And we actually acquired from Tom Booth, one of the Booth family descendants and Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research board member, and big supporter of Cranbrook in the Center. Tom Booth helped us to retrieve from his sister the chair that Henry Wood Booth is sitting in. And so this chair, which was used in the Cranbrook Press in 1900 to 1902, was used as the seat for Henry Wood Booth to sit in to paint, is now some 120 years later back at Cranbrook. And I actually dressed up as this portrait last year for Halloween. I just love that portrait. His face is so rich. Moving on to the next cartouche, let me turn my flashlight and see if that helps. Thank you. Henry Wood died in 1925. Thank you for that fact. Next, we have 1966, the Cranbrook Summer Theater School reception honoring Dame Judith Anderson. And so the Cranbrook Summer Theater School is older than 1966, but in that year they hosted Dame Judith Anderson, who was a silent film star. She went on to win the Tony. She became a star of Broadway, and then she went on to star in Rebecca by Alfred Hitchcock. So award-winning actress Dame Judith Anderson, the Australian actress. This is painted on the occasion of her visit. And of course, the Summer Theater School is also where Sarah Smith of the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House was a longtime volunteer. Next, we get a painting commemorating Dr. Lillian Bowder, who was head of Cranbrook Schools and then president of Cranbrook Educational Community. And so she is painted here with a background of blue and green representing Cranbrook School, and then the yellow and red representing Kingswood, because she helped oversee the merger of Cranbrook schools into a coeducational school. And then the addition of the Emeritus 1996. And the design of this crane was designed by Catherine McCoy, who was head of Cranbrook's design department with her husband Michael McCoy from the 70s to the 90s. And Kathy McCoy designed the crane to be a universal Cranbrook Educational Community logo. And so it has the perfect semicircular C of Cranbrook Academy of Arts logo designed by Eliel Saarinen. And then it has the crane, which is adapted from brickwork designed by Henry Scripps Booth, representing Cranbrook, where the crane lands. And then the three little rivers below the crane represent the three historic areas: the Institute of Science, the schools, and the Art Academy. And then the little white swishes, which says Emeritus 1996, when she was made President Emeritus, those are adapted from the Art Museum walls. Next, we have the 50th anniversary of Cranbrook House's completion in 1908 with the Booth family crest. Then we just have the Cranbrook House front door from 1908, representing again the 50th anniversary and the reception held here that year. Oh, sorry. This one represents the deed of Cranbrook House to the Cranbrook Foundation upon George Booth's death in 1949. So that one was painted they both say 58. So again, research project updating the information about these cartouches. Here you have the Cranbrook Foundation design repeated again on this side of the room with the 6 institutions represented as 6 cranes. Next, we have one that I just sort of question its beauty, but this represents the addition of the Woodward Avenue entrance. And so it's also commemorating Dr. Lillian Bowder, so she has the LB at the top, and then Dan Hoffman's arrival feature, which I think symbolizes both the physical constructions that Dr. Bowder oversaw here at Cranbrook, and the way that she really transformed the physical Cranbrook community, building and overseeing the fundraising and architectural selection and realization of the natatorium and the Institute of Science edition and the new studios and the Brookside edition. I think that the arrival feature, our entrance feature there. I should not be losing internet in Cranbrook House Oak Room. I didn't bring my watch, so I hope I'm not going forever, but you're all sticking with me, so thanks everyone for turning off the news for a little bit and joining me for this non-moving magic wall. If I touch the Oak Room panels, nothing happens. In front of this screen, I do feel like I could be on CNN making the map go and giving everyone heart attacks. But let's keep going. We're halfway there. I am sorry about the sound. I'm not sure if everyone is getting sound issues. I really feel, unfortunately, very limited about what I can do with the technology here, as Facebook's platform does not have many settings I can adjust. So we're back into the 1920s here with Carolyn Farr, commemorated the wedding. I think this is painted in the 70s, just stylistically. But this commemorates the wedding of Carolyn Farr to Henry Scripps Booth in 1924. And it is commemorating specifically the freighter, the ocean freighter, named the Carolyn Farr, because the Farr family were in the shipping business, and so there were freighters. Next is one of my favorites. This commemorates the 80th birthday of Harriet Messenger Scripps, Ellen Booth's mother, in 1924. And Henry Scripps Booth described his grandmother, because people do kind of get a laugh out of commemorating an 80th birthday party with a sort of nude Greek goddess with one breast out in this sort of Olympic run. But Henry Booth said that his grandmother was painted as a fleet runner bearing a torch. It was the 80th birthday of a jolly little lady who was always ready to do anything from walking the tops of walls to riding in an airplane when you could see the ground between your feet. And so this was painted on December 31st, 1918, or commemorating the party on that date. Next, we have the UIA, which represents the International Architects Meeting that was held here in the 1960s. Next to that is the commemoration of the reception for all the bishops of the American Episcopal Church who were attending the National Convention in Detroit in 1961. And so on that occasion, which was held down in Detroit, it was in September of 1961, and there was actually a special exhibit of modern American religious art that was put together by Cranbrook Art Museum by Richard Mullenberger. And then in the Guildhall of Christ Church Cranbrook, Henry arranged a show of antiques and ceremonial objects used by Christ Church Cranbrook, which were all of those wonderful Society of Arts and Crafts and early Cranbrook-made silver pieces. And then down at Cobo Hall, Detroit's Convention Center, there was a graphic presentation of Cranbrook that was projected into the hall. And so then the reception for all of the bishops was held here at Cranbrook House, which is commemorated there. Next in the corner, we have 1957 with the crook, and this is representing the Institute of Pastoral Studies, which was here in Cranbrook House from 1957 until 1981 when it moved to Marygrove College. And the Institute for Advanced Pastoral Studies was founded by Christ Church Cranbrook in 57 to be a place for ministers to come and study. It has since, in just the last couple of years, been reestablished by Christ Church Cranbrook to help ecumenical and diverse groups of clergy build leadership capabilities, develop networks, and provide a spiritual grounding to pastors that shepherd congregations in Metro Detroit. And the program will provide a platform for positive social change in Detroit. While administered by Christ Church Cranbrook, learning sites will be located in local congregations and allied organizations throughout the metro area. So you can clearly learn more about the reincorporated pastoral studies on the Christ Church Cranbrook website. Our next cartouche are the arms of Christ Church Cranbrook, which were painted in honor of a reception for the first rector, Dr. Samuel Simpson Marquis, and his wife in 1925. And of course, the Christ Church Cranbrook logo, our shield, crest, is a combination of the Episcopal Church of America with the red cross within the Cranbrook Booth family shield. And just a funny aside about the Institute of Pastoral Studies, which you may have never heard about. I really know about it mostly for being the people who lived in Cranbrook House before we had central offices. But there are 6 Cranbrook institutions whose flags should march in graduation. And what I discovered was that no one was sort of in charge of those flags, and an incident occurred. The flags went missing. I successfully located most of them. And what I realized is that for graduations for the past couple of decades, the students have been marching behind the Institute of Pastoral Studies flag. So one of my projects for 2020, which has been sidelined because we're not doing any marches with flags, was to try and reproduce the correct flags so that the students actually are marching behind the flags of the Cranbrook institutions. I love that the Institute of Pastoral Studies has a flag, but since they haven't been here since 1981 and are now back at the church, which is not part of Cranbrook, I did decide to archive that flag, roll it up into acid-free paper, and store it with our other historic memorabilia. I just thought it was funny that who knows how long the graduations have been marching proudly behind that Institute of Pastoral Studies flag. And I agree, more flags, but let's get the correct flags and not lose the ones that we have. Next, we have a Star of Wonder, which commemorates the annual 12th Night Gala. And the 12th Night Gala started here at Cranbrook House by Henry Booth in 1950. And it actually has a longer history than that. In December of 1919, we're now looking at the Christmas star there. In December of 1919, Henry Scripps Booth, with his parents and friends, attended a comedy at the Schubert Detroit Opera House by William Shakespeare called Twelfth Night. And in 1921, Booth attended the Twelfth Night Revels at the Detroit Society of Arts and Crafts. And those two events inspired Henry Booth to sort of develop a love of the Twelfth Night story and the idea of a sort of Twelfth Night party. And so from 1929, when he held the first one here at Cranbrook, and then in 1950, when he made it an ongoing annual event, he would have on January 6th, all of the leaders and staff and faculty of the Cranbrook institutions gather in the Cranbrook House Library and throw the 12th Night Galas. I'm sure some of you attended them. The photographs in Cranbrook archives are incredible and absolutely wild. It was meant to be, in Henry's words, a classless event. And so there was a tale, there were songs that were sung, there was sort of roles for every leader. I love when you get someone like very serious Glenn Paulson, who in his 12th Night photos as director of the Academy is sitting there just sort of stone-faced in a full wool suit with like a funny hat and maybe a flower in his vest pocket. And meanwhile, other people are in full drag, full clown makeup, I mean, over the top. And he looks absolutely miserable. And he's sitting next to Loya Saarinen, who is quite elderly at this point. It is sort of in this grand ball gown from the 1930s that she has brought out. I mean, these pictures are amazing. It's the last 12th Night was with Henry Booth in 1988. And then in 1989, they had the final one, which they called Reminiscences of 12th Nights Past, and then the event was retired. I sort of wish, as a Cranbrook community employee, that we did have more occasions in which to gather across the community and actually meet the other people who live here and work here. So I think Henry should be commended for keeping that up for so many years, even if certain staff members really look in photographs like they were not having fun at the 12th Night party. I would have. Now we've come to the portraits of Ellen Booth and George Booth, painting by Harold Brett in 1950. And these were actually painted for Cranbrook School and then eventually made it into the library and finally have found an appropriate and dignified place here in the Oak Room, but they were painted for the schools. And we see a series of more cartouches, and I promise we're getting towards the end. We see the Oakland Citizens League 25th anniversary founding stele. So the Oakland Citizens League was founded here by the Booths. Next, we have the commemoration of the formation of CGA, which stands for Cranbrook Gardens Auxiliary, which was the volunteer organization that Henry Scripps Booth established to preserve his parents' gardens. And then the CHA, Cranbrook House Auxiliary, which the house is painted in the elephant snout wine silver plate vessel that's in the dining room. And then the house is coming out of the elephant vessel, which the house was formed in 1974. And some of you, if you're longtime readers of the Cranbrook Kitchen Sink blog, you'll know that Cranbrook House was slated for demolition for much of the 1960s and 70s. Its use was just considered underused for such a valuable piece of property. And George Booth had studied in the 30s and the 40s how to convert the house into something useful. But he determined with the structure of the house, there was no way to sort of break up these small rooms into larger spaces. There was never going to be the parking. And so it was really, the Cranbrook Foundation was sort of thinking, how can we demolish the house and build a new Institute of Science? Can we build a new schools performing arts center? That's a great piece of land. And so by Henry establishing the Gardens Auxiliary in 71, the House Auxiliary in 74, it got volunteers really interested in the house. It opened the house to the public. And then the great savior of the house was the formation of Cranbrook Educational Community. The foundation had very minimal full-time staff, but today the CEC has a very large sort of bureaucracy and leadership that needs office space to oversee Cranbrook. And so Cranbrook House was again given a sort of more fully fleshed out purpose and saved from the wrecking ball, which I think is to all of our benefit. The organizations did combine in 1977, but their cartouches remained. Next, we have this funny little cartouche with the woods behind and then the burr. And so it is a burr in a dell, which was painted in 1962 honoring Dr. and Mrs. Edwin Sharp Burdell. And so their last name was Burdell. And so it's a burr in a dell. Get it, Henry? Thank you for your humor. And Dr. Burdell was actually one of Henry Booth's oldest friends. He was a classmate from the Asheville School, which is where Henry Scripps Booth left his private tutor here at Cranbrook House and went for high school to the boarding school in Asheville, Carolina. And so Dr. Burdell went on to an illustrious career. He founded a technical university in Ankara, Turkey. He came back and he held leadership positions at MIT and Ohio State, and he was hired in 1962 to come and discuss the future of Cranbrook Kingswood schools. And so it was really Dr. Burdell who began the conversation of co-education at Cranbrook, which occurred exactly 50 years ago this fall. Next, we have this letter S, which was the initial for it is the marriage of Grace Ellen Booth and Harold Lindsay Wallace in 1914. I'm not sure. No, that is down there, the Wallaces. I'm not sure what the ASO is. My list has betrayed me. I'm not sure what those two are. That is Wallace. And then we have 1921 with the little rabbits. And this is Yard Goods and Rabbit Warren with newspaper background, party honoring Alice S. Newcomb, daughter of the department store merchant, and Warren S. Booth. And so I think the textile is from the department store, and then Warren Booth followed his father and grandfather into the newspaper business. And someone, I'm sure, can tell me what the rabbits are. Rabbit Warren? Okay, Warren Booth. I get it. Whew! Guys, this was a doozy. I have never thought about these cartouches for so long and in such an order. And now the sun is down. I hope that was fun for everyone, for my 36 viewers. I was a little bit caught off guard by today's Live at 5. It's a busy time in the country and a busy time in Cranbrook Center. So if you do have other places that you want to go, please email me with where you would like to see. You can find me at my email address, kadkisson@cranbrook.edu, or just center@cranbrook.edu. And those of you who have emailed in location suggestions, I do have a list, but I hope that you understand and are sympathetic to the fact that a lot of places are just off limits. So hopefully in 2021, Cranbrook will be a little bit more open, but at the moment we are being overly cautious, and I think responsibly so, especially now as this new wave of virus infections tick up around the country. Me going inside buildings for these tours is just not sort of getting the approvals that all of you, my loyal fans, would love to see. I know, Mary Agnes, I really want to get inside of Kingswood. That is my #1 goal. But actually, good news recently, well, terrible news for Cranbrook, good news for us. I have learned that Cranbrook schools will not be coming back in person between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which may be our opening to get into Kingswood. I shouldn't be happy about that. So thanks so much for following along and for all of your suggestions and your feedback. This was a fun one. It was a nice thing to do. It pointed out to me just how many holes we still have in the record. You know, my passion, my interest is what brought me to Cranbrook is really the art and architectural history and the Saarinen history. And what has been a joy to learn about is more the Booth family history. I knew nothing about the Booths before I came to Cranbrook. And so coming over here to Cranbrook House and spending an afternoon familiarizing myself more with these events in the story of this building and the events in the story of the family, I think what we can see as we look around at all of the different cartouches is just Henry Booth's influence of what is commemorated. Other than the Lillian Bowder commemorative cartouches, I think all of these can be traced directly to Henry Booth, either his hand, these are painted by him, or certainly his sense of humor in the subject matter, or simply his work to bring people like the Bishops' Council of America to Cranbrook, or the Architectural International Convention, bringing that here to Cranbrook. Those are all things that Henry Booth played a part in, and that he wanted, rightfully so, to be commemorated here in the Oak Room. So who knows what will be next added to the Oak Room. I've heard some ideas of things that could be added. I'm not sure, looking at all of these, seeing how much room we have, I don't know if we should commemorate parking lots being built, but you know, the idea went past my ear and I just let it keep going behind me. Thanks so much for looking at all of these beautiful cartouches with me and for giving my hypothetical intern that one day I will have a project to do, which is to write a little guidebook, because one thing I know as a curator is that I stand on the shoulders of the archivists and curators who have come before me, and it is so wonderful when I sit down to prepare a lecture or a Live at 5, and you go into the files and you find where Mark Coyer or Leslie Edwards or Greg Whitcop or Roy Slade have written a compiled history of something, and these are in need of some serious exploration. This is just a little bird pin, a gift from Leslie Mayo on the occasion of my 30th birthday, commemorating some of our projects together. And on November 15th, we will be having our next special tour and special behind-the-scenes event. As I have said here on Live at 5 before, we love bringing you these free experiences, and some of our lectures are free and open to the public. But of course, we are a nonprofit organization, and like PBS and NPR, we rely on your support. And so if you're able to donate to the center, that's wonderful, or you can support us and get another tour with me. And events like that are coming up. The Mary Chase Perry Stratton and William Buck Stratton house tour on November 15th. That's a Sunday afternoon. Mary Stratton was the founder of Pewabic Pottery. This is a house that she designed with the architect Buck Stratton in the 1910s for herself and her mother and sister. She created custom pottery fireplaces and window ledges, wall installations, bathrooms. The only full Pewabic bathroom sinks are in her house. She married her architect eventually, and they moved the house from Jefferson Avenue in Detroit out to Grosse Pointe Park. We will be touring it in person, live online. And so it really is a remarkable house that is now stewarded by Philip Morrissey and Joseph Nicarata of Fleur Detroit, and we will be touring their really incredible collection of Cranbrook art within the Stratton House. It is going to be unforgettable. It's my third favorite house in Michigan after Sarnen House and the Alden B. Dow House. I think you're going to love it. Go right now to center.cranbrook.edu and buy your ticket to our tour of the Stratton House. And then coming up in December, we're just ironing out the details of another tour here in Cranbrook House focused on holidays with the booths and talking about the Christmases and New Year's celebrations that the family had here. So you can look forward to that on December 13th. Tickets aren't quite ready yet, but just want to put that in your little mind. Thanks so much for following along, everyone. Thanks for your support. Be safe out there, wear your mask. And I will be back next Tuesday on Instagram for Live at 5 and next Wednesday on Facebook. Always right here from the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. I'm Kevin Adkison, and I will see you next week.